The bad news is, it's probably the least sexiest talk. The good news is I've only got 15 minutes, so I can just go through it and it'll be high level. So I'm a pre-sales engineer. What that essentially means is I talk to prospects, customers, and then from there what we do is we work out if our tool is a good fit. Very high level is what I do. Today's talk, again, I'm not going to be a dead horse. I'm just going to talk about zero trust as a concept. It's been around for years, but the reason it's been around for years, it's not been a fad like some other topics, is that because it's still a foundational piece of your network, something that people don't do on a day-to-day basis. Again, it's not something that's really nice, fancy, gives you immediate ROI. It's something that takes a lot of time, a lot of care, and there's a lot of questions that come out of a process like zero trust that might not be, let's say, gratifying to people. So I'm going to go through a general framework for implementing zero trust. Again, it's not prescriptive. It's just something that I kind of whipped up because I thought it would be a good idea, maybe about going back to basics, finding some things that you don't like in your network, really permissive rules that you don't know what they do, for example, and then moving on into kind of how you want to not have to clean your room every single year because there's horrible mess and bloat in your policies. So zero trust concept is never trust, always verify. Weird anecdote, I had a boss who said it was always trust and verify, and he kept on going through it. Needless to say, our zero trust program didn't go very well. But essentially, zero trust in a nutshell is you want to be explicit about what kind of access you have in your network rather than implicit. You want to say, I only want this kind of traffic to go east-west, rather than, oh, I'm not sure what kind of traffic goes east-west, we'll allow everything. East-west, north-south, it's all relevant. It all comes under zero trust. Like you say, you can have a breach. You may have a breach. It might happen right now. It might happen in 14 days. If you have the appropriate controls in, you can limit that. It doesn't have to be as bad as it could be. And so modern network securities really focus on instead of prevention rather than the reaction, and zero trust is more of a prevention basis. Again, it's not fancy. We're not CrowdStrike. We're not going to have a Formula One car at every infosec. We're going to talk you through maybe about logical things in your network and best practices as you go through it. So this is my 5 steps. This is my zero trust Bible, if you like. The first topic is going to be about identifying your sensitive assets. And of course, the first question you're going to want to ask is, what are the sensitive assets? You could be a healthcare provider, and that's going to be patient information. You could be a financial provider, and that's going to be customer information. It's going to be information that you don't want to get in the hands of a competitor, a bad actor. Again, very simple. What is that data used for? Do I need this information? Are we gathering information just for information's sake? That might be something that comes out of it. I know I worked for an organization that sells red cans of drink, and the amount of information they collected but didn't do anything with was actually really, really quite scary. So one of the answers that came out of that was, well, maybe we don't need to know where our warehouse trolleys are at all moments in time, or who's using them, or who's going to the bathroom, for example. And this is where it gets juicy. Who currently has access? The answer to that, more often than not, is I'm not quite sure, scarily. And where does data reside? A bit more of a simple question. Is it in the room next to me? Is it in the cloud somewhere? But most importantly, do I know where it is? I'll cover the last one as we go through it. So what we do is we work with organizations that have multiple vendors in their infrastructure, right? You might have Palo Alto, Fortinet, Cisco. You might have a variety. Other vendors are out there. And what those vendors have is their own proprietary system for linking into those firewalls, reading policies, maybe having optimization. And what we aim to do is to be agnostic. So we'll connect into those devices, we'll pull the policy information out, and we'll structure it in a way that kind of makes sense to you. Do you want to clean up your rules? Do you want to see what's unused? Do you want to see what's disabled? What's being shadowed, for example? And then we assist you with that process. One of the first tools for zero trust is an IPAM, so an IP address management tool. This is really, I guess, like a foundational piece. To have somewhere that isn't an Excel sheet, isn't a booklet, isn't some sort of CMDB database, that you've got all of your subnets, what they do, who owns it, for example, maybe apply an attribute, sensitive, PII, PCI, to have all of this in there. And the reason I've said to integrate with an IPAM is because it's a central repository for this information. You can maybe see a theme here about organization, but as time goes on, it helps you eliminate blind spots. So the blind spots and how we help you is what we call a unified security policy. I'll show you what it looks like, but essentially you get to map the zones in your network. So let's say you have a database zone in your network, you have an external facing interface. Through an IPAM, you can pull all those in and you can map that relationship. You can say, I just want Telnet to go across there, I just want SSH. So you're now defining the relationship in your network. Now, I'm going to avoid fines and penalties because it's been beaten to death, but obviously there are fines and penalties that are not monetary. They're reputational, which, if anything, is worse. CrowdStrike, I mean, a simple accident, it will probably haunt them. The meme community went crazy as well. Everyone saw things on LinkedIn, think pieces that didn't really go anywhere, address anything. That's the cost to your business. So by mapping all these areas in your network out, you can really accurately kind of see where traffic's going, redundant zones, for example. The second thing was about knowing the flow of the data that you've got in there. What we do, again, policy information isn't just what policies I've got going from A to B. It's actually routing information, BGP neighbors, what my routing tables are doing. And so what we've got is an interactive topology map, and you can run quite a nice query saying, I want to go from source A to source B. Can I get there? Is there routes? Is there policies in my firewalls allowing this, disallowing this? Again, just taking a step back at a really basic level, a lot of IT teams, they run on goodwill. If you're still office-based, people walk in, they say, oh, can you just do me a really quick favor? Can you just check this thing? Sometimes that printer that they're asking for that worked last Friday, it might be off at a plug. It might be someone's made a big change. A tool like this really sort of takes you back, helps you, stops you avoiding any additional firewall bloat, which is essentially a rule that you don't need. Keeping it moving, I said about the mapping the relationships with all the different zones you've got in your network. Again, it's not exciting, but it's a foundational piece that you need to do. So in this case, for example, going from site B, which let's say might be an office, it might be a data center that we've got there, to our public interface. Again, all these zones are pulled in, hopefully from your IPAM. We can say, okay, we only want to allow these particular services. We only want, so the policies that exist in those firewalls, they have to be last hit within 90 days. They have to be current, they have to be alive. If there is a breach, let's mark its severity as low, for example. You can mark them as medium, high, critical, as you wish. But this is really, again, keep going back to it, a foundational piece, knowing what traffic should traverse your network. Surprisingly, a lot of organizations still don't know. So now you've done all that, you know what permissive policies you've got, you know what relationships you want to have between the different zones in your network. You now need to architect how that should look like. That might mean going back in time into an architecture piece and saying, okay, well, what was this application meant for? Okay, we have Telnet, which is still a common protocol that's still used. Okay, you've got 6 months to remove Telnet. It's going to be SSH from here on forth, right? So kind of breaking these bridges down. And again, running the path analysis for the topology maps, that's hugely useful as well. Someone says they have access to something and they shouldn't do, or vice versa. You can immediately see that on these kind of intelligence tools. And so the last one is what you're going to want to do after you've achieved zero trust, or as close as zero trust. Let's be honest, we live in a real world. You want to monitor any policy violations. So now that you mapped your zone information, so we go from site B to our external AWS side, you want to detect policy risk and violations. So something that we do, I always think of it as like my mum or my dad, for example. If I'm making a change in my life, they say, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do that? And that's what we do. So we'll integrate into your workflow, whether that's ServiceNow, any other ITSM that you use, and you can actually leverage our integration and say, well, hold on, you're raising a change to allow Telnet across this PCI environment, for example. Are you sure you want to run that? And then you have to go to like an additional approval, for example, right? So we're introducing a bit of logic in here. So that's our network assessment piece. So again, we're trying to stop the bleed from continuing, and then integrate into your vulnerability management. So a lot of organizations have, let's say, Qualys, Tenable. So we can integrate into those threat intelligence platforms and tell you about your high-risk assets in there as well. And then moving on to the second part, so centrally managing segmentation. A big part of this is, I remember when I was a network engineer, on a Monday morning, if I had a really permissive change, occasionally I made a mistake. Human, it's a Monday morning, things happen. So we have a tool that actually orchestrates changes for you. So we'll look at what you've got, all of your policy information, and I will say, okay, well, all you need is a network object adding to this rule. You don't need a fresh rule. We don't need to reinvent the rule here. So we encourage zero-touch policy change. I'll be honest, some organizations don't use it, or they do it as just as a verification, as a backup. I remember twice weekly cabs, no one ever asked me, is this change going to work, funnily enough. They asked me, what happens if it breaks, but never, is it going to work? And then from all of this, again, you can generate audit reports. So on a periodic basis, you might want to have an unauthorized change report. You might want to have a violation report, just to make sure that you are still sitting within, theoretically, what is a zero trust environment. On the subject of AI, because it wouldn't be a talk without someone mentioning AI in some shape or form, what we released earlier this year is a Teams bot. And essentially, like I said, a lot of IT teams, they run on goodwill. People coming into the office, people messaging you ad hoc, Slack, Teams, and saying, okay, well, this doesn't work. Can you fix this for me, Mr. Network person who's really overworked and on a really small team? So what we've got is this Teams bot where you can put in just plain language, can I get from this point to this point in my network over this port? And it will link into our system, and it will give you a report, and it will say, okay, well, no, there's a particular device, in this case an NSX router that's blocking it. You could download a PDF to raise a ticket or give it to your friendly network person and say, look, this is what Tufin's telling me. You might want some device details, for example, if you're sitting there and you're interested as such. Or you might want to open up a ticket, which I wouldn't give that to everyone, only select people, otherwise you're going to have loads of tickets asking for access. There's role-based access control built in. So you can immediately just create a ticket if you're a member of the network, and then off you go. You can allow that traffic there, and you throw it into that process. And again, you can have your mum and dad ask you, are you sure you want this? And you have those checks there. So just to summarize, zero trust is still relevant because it's something that we haven't quite mastered to this day. You're not going to get to a point where all of your policies have explicit hosts for source, destination, explicit services. Live in a real world, that may never happen, but we can get as close to that as we can, right? We can mitigate risk that exists within our network. And that's really what hopefully my talk has helped push some people to. If you want to tell me how good this talk was or how bad it was and how unrealistic it was, we've got the booth up there, so you can come out and scold me if you like. I won't take it personally. So thank you very much. Have a great day.